Hi, I'm Promise Israel, and this is my series, I'm Tired of Pretending. And today we will cover what I believed about smoking before I ever tried it. Let's get started. Took me a minute for me to get to know you, but I'm here, and now I'm ready. I neglected the fact that I didn't know you now, but I'm ready. Before I say anything else, I am not promoting cannabis use. This series is not meant to glorify, encourage, or enable cannabis use, especially in the area of smoking. This is my personal experience, my personal reflection, and a deeper conversation about honesty, environment, belief system, and how our perceptions are shaped long before we ever personally participate in something. Before I ever smoked, I had very strong beliefs about smoking. My mom didn't smoke, my dad didn't smoke. They don't smoke. So, having two parents that don't smoke, it was cool. But everybody else smoked. And if you've watched video 1 and 2, you will know a little bit more about where I'm coming from regarding my environment that I was brought up in and the village that raised me. So, seeing how everyone else responded to smoking as far as their behavior and their character and how I perceived them as a child, I believed smoking was bad. I believed it changed you. I believed it crippled you in a way where you don't progress. I believed it aged you. I believe it made you stink. I believed it was the reason why you didn't have money. I believed, to sum it all up, I had no good thoughts about smoking at all. None. Zero. And to be honest, those beliefs came from what I saw. As a kid, I noticed patterns within people, and this can go for smoking, drinking, anything that you could be indulging in that is changing your personality or changing who you are in different settings. And change is not always bad, but change is also not always good. Just like everything I thought about smoking, the fact that it aged you, that it made you stink, that it would hinder you from progressing, that it was bad, all of those things are actually true about smoking. But in this video, we're going to take a deeper dive on yes, those things are true, but it's also a way that you can handle yourself when you know the truth about certain stuff. So, based off of just how I saw people change with certain things that they were indulging in, drinking, smoking, let's just keep it there. It didn't take me long to already put a label on how I felt about this. And I remember one time as a kid, I found out that my kindergarten teacher smoked cigarettes because this is about smoking in general, not necessarily what you smoke. I consume weed. So, of course, I'm talking about that, but whatever you smoke. Everyone around didn't smoke weed. They smoked cigarettes and Black and Milds and whatever else people smoke. So when I was a kid, I remember finding out that my kindergarten teacher, someone who I admired, I remember finding out that she smoked. And I think I found out because I saw her and kids are always watching. She was kind of, I don't know, that's who cares about that part. But I saw her smoking a cigarette and I was like, wow, it really blew me because I literally didn't think that teachers smoked because my mom is a teacher. My mom doesn't smoke. So as a kid, I'm already putting all of these different things in different categories out of complete innocence. So I'm thinking that teachers don't smoke. My mom doesn't smoke. So people who are not teachers and people who act like wild and just kind of weird, they smoke because that's what I saw regarding the village. That's how the response was to certain indulgences. So when I saw my kindergarten teacher smoking a cigarette, it changed my perspective a little bit because I had already experienced her in a way that made me respect her. So it made me think, well, maybe smoking is not really bad because my kindergarten teacher is not bad. And that's just something that I held not to do anything with the information, but that's a very vibrant memory. When I think of my smoking journey, I remember changing my perspective just a little bit when I saw my kindergarten teacher smoke. Not that I wanted to consume, but it made me think that, oh, either she's bad because I had already associated smoking with being bad. So either my kindergarten teacher is bad or smoking is not as bad. Y'all get what I'm saying? So at one point in my life, I did not have a broad perspective on smoking. I didn't see different types of consumers. So that's why the memory of my kindergarten teacher was so vibrant, because she was a different type of consumer based off of what I thought about her prior to ever knowing that she smoked cigarettes. So everyone else that I knew consumed, I just put them in a certain box because of their behavior. That's a real thing. Children can see when you're behaving poorly or when you're embarrassing them, or kids pick up on it even if they don't have the language for it. So I didn't have the language for certain stuff, but I already knew how I felt about certain stuff. So I only saw one type of smoker. This particular type of smoker looked undisciplined. What does undisciplined look like when you're a consumer of anything? Being undisciplined is you cannot even afford to do what you're doing. In certain environments, you have people borrowing money so they could buy cigarettes, or borrowing money so they could buy alcohol. That if you can't afford it, you shouldn't buy it. Or you borrowing cigarettes, or you borrowing this, or you getting some on credit from saying the plug. Those are signs of being undisciplined. Also, when you're constantly in a state of consuming, now you're overindulging. So I saw that. I saw an undisciplined smoker. I saw the kind of smokers that looked heavy. You can tell it was kind of weighing on them. As you get older as a kid, you can start seeing stuff like, dang, you can start feeling the heaviness of certain stuff. And of course, y'all know, I just thought smoking was normal because I saw it 24/7, unless I'm with my mama. And so I told y'all in a previous video, my mom was very busy. She was always working. And it's just what it is. So I saw the type of smoking that it wasn't healthy, but it was normal. The kind that felt attached to stagnation, strong smells, stinky smells, poor habits, just the whole dynamic of it in the environment. It didn't feel intentional, uplifting. It didn't feel clean. It didn't feel elevated. So I saw it as just a dull thing, a bad thing. So parents, adults, when you're consuming whatever, you need to make sure you are aware of how you're presenting yourself with this habit, because kids associate this with that. They associate green with grass, blue with the sky. So when they start associating certain stuff with you, it's going to be hard to believe anything different. So if you're a consumer, you smoking and it's changing your personality, you drinking and it's changing your personality for the worse. And what is the worst? You get angry, you're hitting your kids, you're being up mean to your spouse, you don't have any money, you're spending all your money on your habit, you can't take care of your responsibilities. Ladies, you're not fixing up, you don't look feminine, you don't talk feminine, you're just weighed down and barred down. Those are bad behaviors, those are bad changes. And listen, a lot of people say that certain indulgences are portals. Yes, I think it's very important for me to say this next part out loud. Sometimes people assume that a person eventually tries something, that they must have always secretly admired it, or they must have really wanted to do it. They always think that that person couldn't wait to do that. But that's not true, because it's most definitely not my story. My perception around the concept of smoking was negative for a very long time. I did not grow up looking at smoking as something that was glamorous. And now it was always a conflict, because when I saw smoking on TV, it was also presented in a different way from what I actually saw in my reality. But then also a lot of shows and a lot of TV movies and stuff, they will put smoking into the show as such a negative, bad thing. So of course you're so confused as a kid, because the environment, it looks very strange, and how people consume looks strange. Certain movies look different. Oh, that doesn't look like an unhealthy smoker. But then some movies are so rooted in violence that you never want to get involved with that. So I just didn't grow up with thinking that it was good. It wasn't until I saw a different type of consumer consistently that made me realize, oh, maybe I don't know everything it is to know about this flower. This is part of why I want this series to be nuanced, because sometimes when people hear transparency, they automatically assume you are about to swing all the way to the other extreme and start acting like it's no downside to this or to anything. No risk, no consequences, no unhealthy patterns attached to it. But that's not the truth, and that's not what I believe. You have to count the cost before you do anything. So with me being in a season of smoking, it's a cost that you need to count before you start consuming. And if you're consuming, you still need to count the cost. Let's just say you got into this situation or you have a habit of smoking and you got into it in a premature way. It's always okay to just start over. Get grounded with yourself and think if this is something you actually want to do. Count the costs because it's a cost. I believe that cannabis can 100% affect people in ways that slow them down, age them, alter their personality, send them into a deep state of debt, affect their discipline, affect their love life, their relationship with God. I believe it can 1000% become an idol. That's why it's important to be honest about how you're using, about how you're consuming. So, my earlier observations regarding smoking were rooted in real time observation. I'm seeing this with my own eyes. I'm seeing how people are making a choice to go and buy this instead of getting something that they actually need. I'm watching people choose want so. Jesus Christ! I said, Jesus Christ! I understand. I'm just saying it out loud. Jesus! So, what changed my perspective was around age 24, 25. I started realizing something I had never considered before. Wow, there's different types of consumers in the world. And I know that might sound shallow. Y'all might think I'm tripping, but honestly, I think I started seeing stuff in a different way because around age 24, 25, your frontal lobes open up. So it's like I leap from being very kid like, although I'm of age to do adult stuff, you're still very kid like till you turn about 25, some 26, some 27. When those frontal lobes wake up, I was able to see stuff in a different way. So I'm like, oh, it's something I really don't know about this that I wanted to explore. That was a major shift for me because up until then, I grouped everything together. I saw everything as one way, monolithic. I wasn't able to separate the substance from the person or that person's level of discipline. I didn't separate consumption from character, lifestyle, environment, or intention. Everything was literally just, it was one way for me. So now that I think about it, I probably wasn't even able to experience the truth about certain people that I knew who consumed before I saw or felt differently about it. I probably wasn't even experiencing them in a way that wasn't judgmental because judgment starts in the heart. I had judged smoking from childhood. And so that stays rooted in you. That's why it's important when you grow up, when you become an adult, do root work, search your heart. Ask God to help you search your heart because sometimes you could be falling into the category of judgment unknowingly because people are teaching you that judgment is an outward expression. Judgment starts in the heart, love. Sometimes your heart is just bad. And that's not all your fault. But so I started seeing other types of people who consume, actually seeing them in real time, not through the TV. Because when you see stuff on TV, you really don't believe that it's real because you need to see people like this in real life. Especially the whole dynamic around being a Christian and being a smoker or being a Christian and drinking. All of that stuff is so hard to really just be honest about where you are as a Christian because people are literally holding judgment in their heart regarding you because they have associated this with, oh, that's a sinner. Oh, that's a bad person. That's a person that's in a state of drunkenness. Those things are not always true. So you have to learn how to see the person and also see the behavior or see the person and see the substance as two different things and then judge them based off of habits, patterns. Some of y'all are going into some of these situations prejudging. I used to be like that. And then when I started consuming, I needed a little empathy and a little grace because I felt the judgment or you feel the judgment at some point. So boom, around 24, 25, I start being exposed to people who consume or who were what I would consider successful marriages, pretty good kids, careers. They're not asking people to pee in a cup for them. Their job is not doing random drug tests. These are career driven people. They're self employed, they're business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they're Christians, they're coaches, they're teachers, lawyers, and home designers and managers at certain places. So it's like, oh, wow, I started seeing people who consumed who were doing something that did not look like stagnation to me. And it started to erase everything that I had originally thought about smoking. It made me realize I was being a little too one dimensional. And you should think about that as well. It made me step back and ask myself a question. Is everything I think about smoking really about the flower itself? I had to sit with that. That question mattered to me. Not because I wanted to dive right into consuming and exploring, but because I literally realized, oh, I think I've been prejudging people based off of a mindset that I settled in from childhood. And I wanted to repent and break those chains off of me, number one, those chains of judgment. Listen, y'all, stop judging folks. Search your heart. Ask God to reveal things that you don't even know you're judging people about. It could be about anything. I had to sit with that question because also around age 24, 25, that's when I started really coming back around to I want to work on my relationship and my closeness with Christ. I had went through that season of being in the wilderness, still in that season. We're all still in the wilderness to a certain extent. That's why you got to be working on growing every day. But I'm coming back around to look, I want to get close with God. That question forced me to expand my thinking, not to become naive, not to become pro anything or to glorify or promote anything, but to actually examine the totality of the cannabis flower and the totality of people who consumed it. So I took a deep dive in researching and understanding how could a plant like this benefit my life. I'm a former consumer of antidepressants. So, and that's a video for another day, but around this time when I started diving more into educating myself about the benefits of the cannabis flower, I was taking, I don't even know what milligram of Trantelix, and that's a mood stabilizer that it was helping me. And I want to be the first to say, sometimes you need a little extra help in your life journey. During that time, I was dealing with a lot of mood swings and I needed some help. So I spoke with my doctor about just like my mental health, and Trantelix was recommended and I was on Trantelix for quite some time. So when I started doing my deep dive on the cannabis flower, I always wanted to see how could I really be a elevated consumer if this was something I was going to dive into. I didn't want to use it to escape from my reality. I wanted to actually change my reality and allow the cannabis flower to assist me in my happiness, in my joyfulness, in my relaxation. So one thing I would say, and I really appreciate this about myself, I love this about myself. I decided to change my reality before I became a consumer. So to people who are considering consuming, or if you're already a consumer, you really need to think about what's your bottom line? Are you trying to escape? Are you escaping? Be real with yourself. The flower can be something that can assist you, but it doesn't need to be something that you solely depend on, because when you depend on something to help you be a certain way, that's called idol worship. That's what God is totally against. It's not even necessarily that he's against the flower, that he's against smoking. Now, smoking is not good for the human body at all. We run off oxygen as humans. So when you're a smoker, you have to know that you are affecting your breathing and your oxygen consumption in a certain way. That's one of the things where you got to count the cost in the beginning. God is coming after idols in your life. And some of y'all, if you're real with yourself, maybe marijuana is an idol in your life. Maybe cigarettes, tobacco, nicotine is an idol in your life. Maybe you're reaching for that before you reach for God. And that's what you have to come into terms with. How are you consuming? Praise God. Now, let me be clear. Expanding my thinking did not mean I suddenly believed smoking was harmless or I suddenly jumped into smoking. No, it just means that something inside of me changed about how I was perceiving the whole idea around consuming cannabis. because you can consume cannabis outside of smoking, all right? And a lot of people do. And it's strange because a lot of people consume cannabis in a form of an edible, or now we have where people can drink the benefits of the flower and topicals that can be used for the benefit of the flower. So many different ways you can be a consumer. And it's funny how people who consume in a way that is not loud. What is loud? When a person is a smoker, to a certain extent, you know that they're a smoker. Because smokers have to work, they have to do a little bit extra so they won't carry that around with them. You know, if you smoke, you might smoke outside instead of smoking in your house. You don't want it in your clothes. You don't want it in your hair because those are the cons of smoking. Now, if you indulge in cannabis in a different way, you're able to mask it a different way. And sometimes people are consuming cannabis in a way that you can't see it or smell it, but they're consuming and they have lost their way. So they think that the way that they consume is somehow better than how you consume. When in fact, y'all are the same types of consumers, just consuming in a different way. It's so easy for judgment to form in people who are not smokers, but let's be real. Consuming anything could become idol worship, point blank, period. And I know a lot of people say, well, say do not overindulge. He said overindulge. He didn't say do not indulge. Do not be drunken. He didn't say don't drink. Watch yourself. I just wanted to make sure I said that. I think if we're going to talk honestly about cannabis, we need enough maturity to admit two things can be true at once. Number one, it can absolutely be used in ways that are undisciplined, unhealthy, and harmful. Number two, not every consumer fits the same box. For me, that was a major personal shift. So this video is about the power of perception. It's about how what we see first can become what we believe deeply. One type of exposure can make us think we understand the whole story. In my case, I had to eventually admit that my early perception, while rooted in real-time observation, was also very limited. When life started showing me more layers, I realized I had a deeper insight, which gave me a choice. I could either cling to a rigid perception because it was familiar, or I could expand my thinking enough to examine the full picture with honesty. That does not mean abandon wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. It just means become more accurate, gather more information, do more research, study a little bit harder. And I think that is what this whole series is about for me. Telling the truth, not just about what I do or don't do, but about how my thinking was formed and how it evolved. I'm personally still learning to separate image, assumption, environment, and reality. I'm still doing that for myself. I'm still having grace on myself in this season of smoking, because sometimes I could be hard on myself with thinking that I have to somehow push myself out of who I am right now because of the bad association I have with the consumption of cannabis. I have to work really hard on just embracing where I am in life. Not enabling or planning to stay here, but just embracing and trying to figure out, why am I even here, and enjoying the whole process. So if there's one thing I want people to take away from this video, it is this. Sometimes what we believe about something is not the whole truth. Sometimes it's the truth of what we've been exposed to. And those are not always the same thing. For a long time, I believed that smoking was one thing and one thing only. But eventually, life showed me that there are two types of consumers. And that pushed me to expand how I felt about the cannabis flower. Not to glorify it, not to excuse it, but to understand this conversation with more honesty and openness. And that's the truth. More people need a safe space to exist where they are in life. Not that they want to stay there, but because they're worthy of being seen and understood wherever they are in life. This is I'm Tired of Pretending. I'll see you on the next one. Praise God.